ASEM Forum on Human Rights of Older Persons, Present and Future. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you're well rested for the next session, which is also the last session of the day. We will be now beginning the special session called Civil Society Talk Concert. With me on stage, we have Professor Yeong-Ran as the moderator, and also President Hyunse as the panel. And it is now my great honor to leave it to Professor Park in order to lead the session.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Yeong-Ran Park, and I'm a social worker by training. And it's a great honor for me to serve as the moderator for this very special session on ASEM Forum on Human Rights of Older Persons, Present and Future. Particularly, this session is named as a Civil Society Talk Concert. So we'll try to have an exciting 2 hours together with all distinguished panelists. Since the morning, we have been talking about protection of human rights of older persons in emergency situations, and we are especially focusing on 3 different emergency situations: health crisis, humanitarian crisis, and emergencies. And this talk concert will focus on human rights of older persons in the COVID era, and we'll discuss the role of civil society. And as we have 6 panelists, but before we go into our presentations, I'd like to invite Ms. Margaret Young, who is the steering group member of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, to give us a thematic presentation on human rights of older persons, present and future. And I'd like to introduce Margaret Young briefly. And she is well known, I think, in Canada. She has been a member of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, and she is the founder of Age Knowble, a Canadian social enterprise. And the Age with Rights campaign was ideated from Margaret's inspiration of rallying and mobilizing more advocacy voices around the world for the rights of older persons. And the campaign was developed in collaboration with GAROP members. It is accessible to everyone, especially the older persons, and it will continue to grow and evolve. So now I'd like to invite Ms. Margaret Yeong to give us an opening talk.
Thank you, Dr. Park. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just get my presentation. Oh, perfect. The presentation is there. Thank you for that. First off, I'd like to congratulate ASEM Global Aging Center on the inaugural Forum on Rights of Older People, and to thank you for inviting the Global Alliance on the Rights of Older Persons to participate. We're delighted to be part of the civil society talk, and we thank Dr. Park, Professor Park, for her moderation of the session. Civil society plays a crucial role in promoting and protecting human rights. We monitor the fulfillment of human rights, we report rights violation, and we advocate for protection and change where it's needed. Therefore, it's with great excitement and anticipation that we've been looking forward to this civil society talk. Let me see. I apologize. I thought the slides were up. Sorry about that. Let me just grab that quickly. Here we go. The Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People was established in 2011. It was born out of the need to strengthen the rights and voices of older people globally. Our alliance of more than 390 members worldwide shares the common vision of a world where older persons live free from discrimination and can fully enjoy their rights. And we do so by engaging at the national, regional, and international levels on the need for a new international instrument on the rights of older people. We welcome you to visit our website at www.rightsofolderpeople.org to find out more about the Alliance. Recently, I had the pleasure of watching a Netflix series called My Love. It was about 6 stories of true love that spans decades. The stories are from Brazil, India, Japan, Korea, Spain, and the USA. In these stories, I saw not only the timeless bonds between 2 individuals, I saw the common themes of what living means in old age that transcends culture and geography. It's about laughters, tears, hope, and despair. It's working and living despite physiological or environmental hardships. It's cherishing the moments of kinship and kinships with family and friends, and its resilience in soldiering on, no matter what may come. As I watch these stories, I'm reminded of the importance of being guaranteed one's human rights in older age. Given humanity's unprecedented triumph in longevity, it's ever more important that our human rights are alongside us in the 100-year life. While there's the hopeful narrative of human rights empowering our longevity, COVID-19 magnified the disproportionate amount of discrimination and inequities faced by our older persons. These headlines are on increased violence, income insecurity, age discrimination are unfortunately all too familiar to those of us who work with older people. This is why the voices of civil societies and national rights, human rights institutions have been coming together united ever more so. A 70-year-old living today faced far more complex social, economic, and geopolitical landscapes than a 70-year-old in 1991, when the principles of older person was first adopted in the UN General Assembly. So we need our national, regional, and international human rights instruments to evolve and be reflective of the human rights protections that's needed for a 100-year life. When we see inequities, we see the events that's at the tip of the iceberg. When we look below the surface, we'll start to notice the patterns of how often an event happens and where. When we go another layer deeper, we start to see the structure and relationships that cause these patterns to occur. These structures could be the policies, programs, power structures, or resource distribution. Then at the deepest level, we'll find the mental models of values, norms, and assumptions that influence how we interact within the structures. In addressing inequities, most of our good work is on shifting mental models or evolving programs, policies, and distribution of resources. For example, HelpAge Korea, one of our talk concert panelists, advocates for low-income older people domestically and overseas, and provide programs that improve their well-being. Another example is the global campaign to end ageism launched by WHO that focus on shifting the mental models relative to ageism. While the interventions in the forms of programs, policies, and attitude shifting will always be the core staples in addressing inequities, the point of inversion comes when we take a rights approach. For the public, we need to make human rights relatable. Most people do not think about human rights until their own rights are violated. The meaning of why protection of human rights is fundamental to human development, particularly in older age, needs to be shared more broadly. For organizations, institutions, and governments, there is the responsibility of ensuring programs, services, and laws further the realization of human rights. Essentially, we need to shift the older person from being the objects of assistance to being rights holders. Rights holders to whom other actors in the system have the obligations toward as duty bearers. So why a new universal legal instrument? Well, aside from the evidence that we've put forth so far, a 2021 study by OHCHR finds that invisibility of human issues central to the older person to be widespread and systemic in the international human rights system. Our independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights of older persons commented that a comprehensive binding legal instrument is needed to address the gaps in international and regional human laws. This was in her report at the recent 48th session of the Human Rights Council. Advocating in the capacity of civil society, like my peers, I too spoke up. In the Age Rights Campaign International Day of Older Persons video, I called out that it's shocking to have conventions that recognize and protect rights of other parts of our identities, such as women and race, but not as an older person. In the next few slides, I'll provide some quick highlights on advocacy work that's undertaken by civil societies at the national, regional, and international stage. It's a small glimpse into all the tireless and needed advocacy work that's happening globally. I selected these examples because I feel they illustrate approaches of some of the key opportunities moving forward. And for the purpose of our forum, I selected examples from Europe and Asia, and I thank the organizations for their generosity in sharing. During the pandemic, ACTO, German National Association of Senior Citizens Organization, put the need for a rights-based approach at the forefront of their advocacy work. They created opportunities and momentum on digital access for older persons through a combination of statements, position papers, and international dialogues. The groundswell began in 2020 when BAGSO hosted an international workshop on rights to participation and right to information, together with the independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons. BAGSO then co-hosted a two-day international online conference titled Strengthening the Rights of Older People in Times of Digitalization with Age Platform Europe and the Germany Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. All this culminated in Baxel's participation in the drafting of the EU Council conclusions on human rights, participation, and quality of life of older people in the time of digitalization. I invite you to reach out to Baxel team for more, to find out more, and to engage in a dialogue of exchange. Philippines offer an example of government bodies and civil societies working together to promote and protect the rights of older people. During the 2021 International Day of Older Persons and the Elderly Filipino Week, the Commission of Human Rights commented that there is a collective duty and responsibility in supporting older people in the Philippines to realize their worth, dignity, and human rights amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The Commission further commented that amidst the various form of celebrations, drafting of a UN Convention on the Rights of Older People guarantee universal recognition and protection of their rights on a platform of rights. The Department of Social Affairs and Development calls on national government agencies, local governments, and civil society to work together to ensure that rights and welfare of senior citizens are respected and protected. The department also highlights partnerships with NGOs, such as the Coalition of Services for the Elderly, in advocating for legislative change. The Coalition of Services for the Elderly is one of our panelists at the talk concert, and we look forward to hearing more. While collaborative regional advocacy in Europe has always been ongoing, the joint focus on human rights, in my view, took a transformative step forward with the launch of the EU Leads the Rally campaign in 2021. Launched by Age Platform Europe, is not only a galvanizing rally cry that brings NGOs in Europe together, but it's also a message to the EU member states to take the lead on the global stage on the rights of older people. Its impact can be seen during the 11th session of the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, and in the recent question posted by the Spanish member of the European Parliament to the Vice President of the European Commission and High Representative of External Affairs on whether there is the intent to push for a UN Convention on the Rights of Older People and what practical next steps will be undertaken. The EU Leads the Rally campaign brought a focal point on the older person with Lead With Us on the International Day of Older Persons. You will find more information on Lead With Us and other campaigns in the ASEM online exhibition. And we'll also have the pleasure of hearing from ORCA, a member organization of Age Platform Europe, at the talk concert. The Asia Pacific region is active with its national advocacies. In November 2019, 39 Global Alliance members from the region signed the Carrera Declaration, calling on the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging to accelerate its work on a convention for the rights of older people. This declaration is one of the outcomes of the capacity building workshops organized by GARUP in 2019. The workshops in 2019 focus on building individual, national, and regional advocacy capacity. According to the participants, the workshops enabled them to engage more deeply in national advocacy and in the open-ended working group on aging sessions. And they truly value the connections that were made across the region during these workshops. We're pleased that HelpAge International, one of our partners at the workshop, are joining us today at the talk concert. We look forward to hearing more about the advocacy work, especially given the innovative animation that was launched on the International Day of Older Persons recently. United Nations offers civil societies the opportunity to discuss and advocate for the rights of older people through its agencies at the international level. The Office of High Commission for Human Rights offers expertise and support to different human rights monitoring mechanisms, including the independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons, the 10 treaty bodies that monitor implementation of existing international human rights treaty, and the Human Rights Council, where the rights of older people was on the agenda recently. The Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, established in 2010 by the General Assembly, is another opportunity for NGOs to be engaged. Its original mandate is to identify possible gaps in existing international human rights framework and recommend how to address them, including the feasibility of further instruments. This mandate was extended in 2012 to very specifically say, to present the main elements of a new international legal instrument to the General Assembly as soon as possible. Accredited NGOs have the opportunity to participate and advocate in the following ways at the working group. Input submissions, being a panelist, making interventions, hosting and participating in side events. These sessions are annual. In 2022, the dates are April 11th to the 14th. The location is at the UN in New York, unless it's otherwise advised. In 2021, we had the session virtually. Workshop participants includes member states, national human rights institutions, and accredited NGOs. We currently have 198 accredited NGOs from more than 70 countries participating. NGOs with Economic and Social Council consultative status are automatically accredited. For more information on the accreditation process, please take a look at our website at www.rightsofolderpeople.org. So what is the impact of our collective advocacy work so far? And what more do we need to do? At the 48th session of the Human Rights Council, rights of older people were on the agenda. A resolution was put forth by Argentina, Brazil, and Slovenia. It was adopted with consensus. There is the opportunity for us to be strategic in identifying some of these recommendations and put some advocacy work against them. In my view, these are three very interesting ones to focus on. The first one, the call to combat ageism and eliminate age discrimination, and to adopt a human rights-based approach in programs and activities related to aging by all actors, including member states, private enterprise, and civil societies. The submission of a report prepared in consultation with member states and other actors on the normative standards and obligations under existing international laws, and to present the findings at the 48th session, which will be of February 28th to March 25th in 2022. And what's interesting about this is that it's just right before our open-ended working group session. And thirdly, is a discussion of this report by a multi-stakeholder group, including older persons, and to submit recommendation in addressing any gaps identified by the 51st session in September 2022. We're pleased that the NGO Committee on Aging Geneva is a panelist at the Tokronsert. They are an active advocate at the Human Rights Council, including, for example, the organization of a side event at the 48th session recently in September, and providing informal input into the resolution that we just talked about. During the 48th session of the Human Rights Council, over 200 organizations from more than 60 countries signed an open letter to the open-ended working group on aging. The open letter highlighted the lack of concrete process made by the working group despite the wealth of evidence that was provided in the last 11 sessions. And despite the need to fulfill its mandate, ASAP, given what we saw through the COVID. The signatories recommend the adoption of the proposal made by Argentina in the 11th session to establish an intersessional working group to start drafting the main normative elements of an international legal instrument, and support the call to include focused discussions on the gaps and opportunities of existing rights instrument in the 12th session. This widespread support for the open letter provides a clear indication on the urgency and magnitude of advocacy that's needed globally. On the backdrop of all this, Global Alliance of the Rights of Older People launched a global advocacy campaign in 2021. The Age of Rights campaign is born out of the need and the vision to empower voices globally, especially those of the older persons, in promoting and advocating for the rights of older people, and for a universal legal instrument that recognize and protect those rights. The rally cry and the campaign are developed with Garrett members' input. The rally cry, Age of Rights, is centered on three key truths and values. The first one, we are rights holders no matter our age, so let's not leave the older person behind. The second one, we all want and need to age with our rights because living doesn't stop until we're at our last breath. And lastly, older persons do not have universal human rights protection and are disadvantaged. To age with rights means every older person are protected with the same standards, no matter where they are in the world. In addition to the hashtag Age with Rights for social media campaigns, we have also the photo frames and virtual backgrounds that you see here on the screen. Since our launch in February 2021, we have added additional tools such as media cards, tweet samples, press release template. The toolkit you see here is open access for everyone to use. We made the choice to open access beyond our members because it is a global campaign. And a new international legal instrument on the rights of older people is possible only when our collective voices is loud and strong. I invite you to visit our website, check out the campaign tools, and to view the advocacy videos from our older persons and NGOs. There are more tactics being contemplated, such as a global advocacy map and a global rally. We would love to hear from you on what you would like to see that's helpful in advancing your advocacy efforts forward. Here are some examples of how older persons and NGOs are using the Age of Rights campaign elements to support their advocacy. Starting at the top left, going clockwise, an older person is advocating for the removal of age as a condition upon which to decide when and whether someone stops working. It was filmed with a hand phone, no design propped up with Age of Rights written across it. It actually gets the message across better than a virtual background. Next is a tweet by Age Platform Europe on the International Day of Older Persons with the Lead With Us rally cry, where Age of Rights hashtag is incorporated. Age of Rights speaks to human development and that age intersects all the identities. So incorporating the Age of Rights is a strategic way to support and amplify your campaigns. Next is incorporating rally cry in the text of your speeches or position statements. And lastly, incorporate them into media cards, such as what UN DESA did for the 11th Open-Ended Working Group on Aging. In closing, I have three asks. First, include a rights-based approach in what you do and advocate for member states and other actors to do the same. Second, reach out to existing and potential advocates nationally, regionally, and internationally for synergies exchange, and elevation of one another's work. Lastly, join the Age of Rights campaign. The more frequent Age of Rights campaign is heard, the stronger our global advocacy voice. Remember, with universal suffrage, it was one man, one vote. And with the disability rights movement, it was nothing about us without us. In unity, we have the strength to impact political will and be heard. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the talk concert dialogue that's coming up.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yeong, for your very comprehensive overview of what's going on around the world, what's happening globally, and also gave us a guideline as to how to take action through existing and emerging platforms to move forward. And I'm sure all of our panelists also enjoyed her presentation. Well, we have 6 panelists today, including Ms. Margaret Yeong, and I'd like to go one by one, give an opportunity to make a short presentation for about, 3 to 5 minutes to talk about what's going on in your own organizations or in your own country as to what kind of impact COVID-19 had to the older people, and also what kind of activities you have been doing to respond to these crises in your own organizations. So we'll go around and talk about 5 minutes each person. And then after assessing what's happening at this point, we will move forward to talk a little bit about our future as to where we will go from here. So I'd like to introduce one speaker at a time and maybe go around. So next person I'd like to invite is Ms. Silvia Perel-Levin, who was also our speaker in the previous session. And now she is here to join us in a talk concert. And she is the chair of the NGO Committee on Aging in Geneva and representative to the UN of the International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse. And she has been an advocate for the rights of older persons. She has been working in the fields of health, aging, and human rights for over 20 years at the World Health Organization, the Union for International Cancer Control, and an independent consultant. So I'm sure she has a lot to say, but I'll give you 5 minutes at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you, Margaret, so much for setting the scene for us to expand in some of the things that you have said. As Moderator said, I represent INPEA and also the International Longevity Center Global Alliance to the UN in Geneva, and I chair an NGO Committee on Aging. That is many NGOs with an interest on aging and older persons. So the idea is not just NGOs that directly deal with or represent organizations of older persons, but also organizations that represent women's issues or other issues, but also support the rights of older persons and help us in their advocacy. And Margaret, you mentioned the resolution at the last Human Rights Council. The final number of the resolution is HRC/48 is the number of the session /3. And what is important about this resolution is that it is the first substantive resolution dealing with the rights of older persons. We have had in the past several resolutions where the Human Rights Council appointed the independent expert and resolutions that they are called procedural, also renewing the mandates of the independent expert. But we always find that it is difficult to quote language or to introduce in other resolutions or in the human rights mechanisms language on older persons because it had not been included in any substantive resolution. And so this is why this one is significant, because for the first time defines ageism. Ageism for the first time comes in the official language of the human rights mechanisms, and really calls on member states to prohibit all forms of age-based discrimination and discrimination of older persons. That is not a minor issue. The fact that also over 60 member states supported, co-sponsored, and that no member state opposed the adoption of this resolution, I think that we can be proud of the achievement that we are moving forward. And also another point to mark here is that the resolution, while resolutions at the Human Rights Council are proposed by the main sponsors that you mentioned, Argentina, Brazil, and Slovenia, and they are negotiated among all member states. In Geneva, at the Human Rights Council, civil society can participate in these negotiations. And we did, not only us from Geneva, but we connected with several NGOs around the world to also propose language or to make edits to some of the language that had originally been proposed. And many of our comments were taken into account, and we even spoke at this negotiation. So that means that we take the stage, and we take active participation in discussing with governments what language and what decisions can be taken that cannot be taken without us. And I think that the lesson, it was very well learned, and member states the governments do approach us to consult before they have an event or a proposal for a resolution, or even how to include the rights of older persons in other resolutions that deal with other topics, like a resolution on the rights on climate change and human rights. And there was one last year that focused on older persons and climate change, and we participated in that resolution as well to ensure that the rights of older persons were well reflected, or a resolution on technical cooperation among member states focusing on the rights of older persons. So we do take the stage at the Human Rights Council, but we also feel that we mediate in a way with other organizations that are headquartered in Geneva. You mentioned WHO with the campaign, or the Global Report on Ageism that they launched and they led, and a report on ageism that was signed on and co-sponsored by also UNDESA and the Office of the High Commissioner and UNFPA. We also participated as peer reviewers of the report, but also we make sure that there is a conversation between the different organizations. So while there is an informal interagency group on older persons, we always insist that older persons are well represented in their discussions. And sometimes because of our connection with the government, we can tell information to one or the other and make sure that they talk, and that older persons are well represented in all programs in WHO, and not only at the unit that deals directly with issues of older persons, but we also interact with the Women's Health Department and the work that they are doing on developing a module on violence against older women, for example, or issues of assistive technologies, and we ensure that older persons are well represented there as well. But also the International Telecommunications Union, that they also have the world a forum on ICTs every year, and now they have this new track on older persons and ICTs. And next year, the 17th of May, which is the World Telecommunications and Information Society Day, the next one, 17th May 2022, will focus on older persons. So we are already working with ITU, with WHO, and other organizations to ensure that older persons are represented, and not only that ICTs or technology companies talk about how to make money of older persons, but see us as full participants in the design and the use and what we want to achieve with new technologies. Another example of our advocacy work is a letter that we are sending today to the new executive director of UN Women, who she sent a very nice letter to civil society about hoping to work with women, and she set up her priorities, and in her priorities she omitted the mention of older women. We cannot let things like that pass, and therefore we organized together with the NGO committee in New York and the NGO committee in Vienna, who together we bring many organizations in the 3 UN headquarters to send a nice letter to her and to set up why older women need to be part of the program. So in short, and I can come back afterwards if anybody has a question, but we really are increasing our advocacy in a way. I think that our visibility has increased. It's not easy, but the message that we are passing through, and especially during the COVID-19, where we also organized several dialogues with the High Commissioner herself. We invited her and she participated in our events, and she keeps participating in our events. She sees us personally for meetings. We organize dialogues between her and the independent expert, and we bring people together. And I think this is part of our civil society role, to bring also the different ministries together, the different agencies together, and that we are part of the solution. We are not the problem, and we should never be the last topic on the agenda. We are part of the whole agenda. And I will leave it there. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was very inspiring comments that you have made, and I think we are all connected in civil society to work together. And our next speaker will be Ms. Jemma Stovell. I think she'll be joining us from London. Are you in London now?
I'm not actually. I'm in Sydney. So
Sydney. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So she is an international relations specialist, and she has been working in international development. And Jemma moved to UK in 2012 to work for National Older People's Organization before she joined HelpAge International in 2014. And she has been a strong advocate and trainer for human rights of older persons. And I'd like to invite her to make her presentation now.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and for the organisers of this really important event. I'm really pleased to be participating in this talk concert, and thank you to Margaret for her presentation. I think you really touched on some important areas, and it really connects to some of the work that we've been doing at HelpAge. Ageism has really been at the heart of HelpAge's work for a number of years, and over the past few years we've been focusing on campaigning to tackle ageism. So thank you for Margaret for sharing some of that in your presentation. We really feel that campaigning, we know is an effective way to try to change social norms and to raise awareness about an issue. So I'll share a couple of our campaigning initiatives. So last year for the International Day of Older Persons, we focused on communication materials on exposing ageism, and we developed an animation to show in a clever way how we need to challenge our own assumptions about aging and older people. And we developed a short animation showing older people in different settings, and the animations were designed to get our audience to think about what assumptions they have about older age. One of the animations starts with an older woman looking like she's sleeping in a chair, but when the image pans out, you realise that actually she's sitting doing yoga with her eyes closed, meditating. Another is of a man who first it looks like he's confused about how to use his mobile phone, but then we see that he's actually deciding on which filter he wants to use on social media. These animations tap into the stereotypes that are strongly ingrained in our societies and encourage viewers to really challenge these and their own assumptions. At the beginning stages of COVID pandemic, we were seeing ageism in different forms. We kept on noticing it everywhere. In the government responses to the pandemic, in the media, we started thinking about how ageism was being perpetuated through society and our systems, and Margaret spoke about that in her presentation. While we know it's important that we think about visible forms of ageism, we really need to understand what is driving these actions if we're going to challenge ageism effectively. We need to understand ageism as a systemic problem, and this means that it's more than isolated events. It's driven by invisible forces such as trends, stereotypes, norms, beliefs, institutions, and laws and policies. So we worked on another initiative for this IDOP that has just passed, and again, we made an animation. It tries to explain what systemic ageism is through a conversation between two older women. And we really feel that storytelling can be a powerful way to explain an issue. We shared the animation through our social media channels using the World for All Ages hashtag. And we really wanted to connect to the global campaign to combat ageism and ensure that whatever we produced was helping the overarching goal of the campaign, which is to change the way that we think, feel, and act towards age and aging. In this animation, we also used a case study from the Philippines, from a fellow colleague who's also on the panel from COSI. And thank you to Emily, who helped us sort of support with this. And I think this goes to show that how civil society are really working together, as Silvia was also mentioning in some of the areas that she's been working in. I think ultimately ageism is a human rights issue, and so we're hoping that by focusing on ageism, it will continue to build the case for a new UN convention. And thank you, Madam Panelist.
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
time.
Okay, so well, actually, it's time for me to invite a gentleman sitting next to me. He's the president of HelpAge Korea, Mr. Hyunse, and he has been playing an important role in building older people's associations in Korea, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Myanmar for the development of self-help groups as their sustainable mechanisms since 2004. And he is now serving as a member of the consultation committees of human rights policy in National Human Rights Commission in Korea since 2015. And he joined ASEM Global Aging Center in Korea as a board member in 2018. So now I give the floor to Mr. Cho.
Thank you, Madam. It is good to see our colleagues on Zoom. HelpAge Korea is an organization working for the older people, especially for the low-income older people in Korea and in other countries. When the pandemic comes, the strong social distancing policies were implemented. So private gatherings were restricted and public centers were closed. Especially senior citizen centers and food service centers were closed. This immediately affected older people, especially for low-income older people, because they used to have a free lunch at the food center, and it became impossible. And also the government announced that, recommended people to stay at home and emphasized that this COVID-19 is very dangerous to the older people. So older people had a perception that it is dangerous to go out. So they have to stay at home. They are reluctant to go out. That means that older people are socially excluded from people, and it makes them ill. They are physically ill because they don't go out, they don't do activities properly, and they are also mentally ill because the depression is increasing due to isolation. Social distancing policy is a policy to protect people from the COVID-19, but it makes older people more ill. And the other thing is that actually among older people, there are people who need care at nursing home. But on the other hand, there are older people who are healthy and active in their social life. But it was recognized that the COVID-19 is a dangerous disease to older people based on the chronological age of 65. Health status of older people varies individual to individual. But so it was wrong for people to have a perception that all older people are vulnerable based on the chronological age of 65. Many people are struggling with the COVID-19 pandemic. In this situation, older people are more challenged physically and mentally. As the pandemic situation is longer than expected, and isolation and exclusion continues, I think this situation has reached the level of violation of the human rights of older people. So what we have done during the pandemic is that first, we have many limitations in supporting the older people because they are staying at home. So first, we provide emergency supplies to the older people. We provide supplies to 200 to 1,000 older people every month in Korea. And also we support older people in countries like India, Philippines, and Pakistan. In the early stage of COVID-19, the quarantine items such as masks and hand sanitizers were provided to the older people. But now, at the moment, we are providing mostly food items. And also, we are supporting the self-help group of older people, especially for the low-income older people. We are supporting the activities of a small group, of 3 to 4 people. The most favorite activity is knitting. They liked to knit cushion and cup plates. And they are now knitting 3 cloths. These 3 cloths will be used to protect tree from the past in the winter season. So, and also we are negotiating parks to dress the tree cloths to 100 trees in 3 areas. And another thing that we had experienced is that we had a Zoom meeting with 10 older persons readers in 10 areas. It was very challengeable for both us and also older people, because older people, they don't have digital devices. They don't have digital knowledge to access to the Zoom. So we support local staff to provide a digital device and also set next to older people to help them. Actually, the Zoom meeting were not so effective comparing with face-to-face meeting. But we could see the possibility that older people can also communicate through the online if there is somebody to help them. We have many limitations on supporting the older people during the pandemic, but we recognize that we need to do more to support them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I was thinking if you were all in Korea, we'd be having a nice dinner after this session together. But unfortunately, we are connected through this ICT. technology. You're from all over different continents now. Next speaker will be Mr. Morjin Luzan. He is currently responsible for the care department of the elderly organization OCRA, which is the largest senior associations in Belgium. And he was also the manager of a division of a home care organization and had an educational role at a non-governmental organization that supported rural communities in Latin America and in Africa. So I'm sure he has a lot of stories to share with us today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here in this talk. I talk about the local situation in Belgium now. And we have seen different types of age discrimination during the pandemic. For example, the selection criteria for treatment in hospitals. In the first phase of the corona pandemic, all attention was focused on the capacity of our hospitals, especially the intensive care beds. And in OCRA, we mentioned all attention was focused on the selection criteria. They will be used in cases of possible shortages. Will older people, purely based on their age, no longer be admitted and treated in hospitals? Our opinion was and is that the selection should be based not on age, but on life chances and expectations. That was also followed in the hospitals, but there were also communications that was a little bit misunderstood here. The communication of the guidelines of the Belgian Association of Gerontology, whether or not to refer residents to the hospitals or not, they were somewhat difficult. Their objective was to give good care for the residents when they can stay in the home care centers, also taking care of their wishes to stay at the home care center. But our main concern was that if they have to stay in the home care centers, they also need to have good care, dignified care. And during the pandemic, it made painfully clear that it wasn't possible at every moment. There were also many protocols and sector guides. We will identify seniors as a vulnerable target group. But we said that, that one older is not another. As a population group, the elderly people are very diverse. We have also made a reaction, an opinion of a health economist who says that elderly people has to pay a tax for the crisis. His opinion was based on that younger people don't have so many health risks, but have to suffer a lot of measures to protect elderly people. And elderly people have to pay a tax for that. We react on this. There were a lot of quarantine measures in retirement homes. They were necessary. They had to find a balance between safety and well-being. But we think it's very important to involve elderly people and their family in creating the rules. It was also that before the pandemic, there was an age limit on access of mental health care. After Corona, the Age Discriminations Council is very good here in Belgium. We think that the Corona crisis has painfully exposed a number of issues, but the pain points were already there. But Corona has magnified them. We think about the finance of the elderly care here, the home cares, the number of staffing, the quality. But are things that there were also before Corona not good. Also, the participation of residents in the home care centers can be better. From the beginning in OCRA, we canceled all activities. We had the phone of the virologist in Belgium, and I think we made a correct assessment. And during the lockdown, we set up a lot of actions to reach elderly people, especially the most vulnerable groups. And local groups, they keep in touch with each other. They call, they chat, they Skype, they make mouth masks. There was also a collaboration with the national broadcast to get exercises for the elderly people on the national broadcast. And what is very important, we were involved with APCAR at the national level in the task force. The task force is responsible to combat the crisis, the pandemic in the home care, in the care sector. And in the beginning, we weren't involved, but we asked that. So we can also speak in terms for the elderly people. That was very important here. And we were also a leader in drafting a national charter for the participation of elderly people in the society. We think, if we emphasize that the elderly people can make their own informed choice whether or not to participate in activities. Age per se can't be a criterion for exclusion. And we also advocate for a global vaccination, and we think that it's good that industry can share the patents and share the knowledge so that vaccination can be global. So that's what we did during the pandemic with OCRA.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Ms. Emily Neonar Beridiko, who is a registered social worker and the executive director of the Coalition of Services of Elderly COSE in the Philippines. And she has been working with older persons since 1989, and she joined COSE in 2000 with the task of facilitating the formation and strengthening of older persons organizations, including the establishment of their community-based programs, advocacy, and partnership building. And now she's leading the COSE. So now I'd like to invite her to make her presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So COSE is the Coalition of Services of the Elderly, is a non-government organization in the Philippines working with older persons. As mentioned earlier, we are working with older persons for 32 years already. So we focus on the formation and strengthening of older persons organizations, advocacy and partnership building, and also we promote community-based programs of the older persons such as healthcare, residential care facility, age-friendly and diversified livelihood, and inclusive disaster risk reduction. So I will share with you today some of our activities and programs that we at COSE and our partner older persons organizations have been doing in the past years, and in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, in ensuring that older person can still have access to their rights and rightful benefits, that their voices or opinions be heard, and that they can still participate in activities or discussion of issues that affects their lives. So first, on campaigns and advocacy, actually we all, through the community organizing efforts of COSE, we established a Confederation of Older Persons Associations of the Philippines called COPAP. So this is a confederation of different older persons organizations in the country, and they are now very active on various campaigns and advocacies as partner of COSE. So to raise the awareness of the general public on the situation of older person, we are maximizing different platforms right now. So currently we have a 1.5-hour regular online discussion. We call it Senior Citizens Tips. Tips means time for information in public service, wherein the regular moderators are 2 older persons. Guests usually are older persons, and sometimes we invite lawmakers and representatives from different agencies who are mandated to implement and monitor programs and services for older persons. So when the COVID-19 pandemic began, there is also a group of older persons established a Facebook group called Seniors in Times of COVID, which now has more than 30,000 members, older persons members. So, and one of the conveners of that Facebook group is one of the moderators of our COSES Senior Citizens Tips, as mentioned earlier. So older persons also do press releases and statements on issues affecting them. Aside from this, older persons leaders are also invited as guests in some of the radio programs at the national and local level to discuss these issues in their campaigns. So through radio and social media platforms, more older persons and organizations are becoming more interested to advocate policies for older Filipinos. Then next, on the consultation and dialogues, while face-to-face mobilization activities are limited and at some point was not allowed as stated in the national guidelines due to COVID-19, this does not stop older persons to continue implementing activities. So older persons actively conduct consultations and dialogues with different national government agencies, such as the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Department of Health, Department of Interior and Local Government, and others. Then one of the dialogues that impacted the lives of older persons during the pandemic was the one organized by the Commission on Human Rights, wherein older persons themselves call for review and revision of the national guidelines by the interagency task force that prohibits older persons to go out of their homes during the enhanced community quarantine. Then with the dialogues, IETF later issued revised guidelines stating older persons are allowed to go out to access essential needs. So that is one. Then through the Action for Pension Coalition, which is also organized by COSE, older persons conduct dialogues with the offices of the Philippine senators to call for reform on the current social pension program by expanding the coverage and increasing the benefit level, because now it's only like 500 pesos a month, $10, very small. So through the passing of universal social pension to cover all older persons and for them to have at least basic income security, especially during this time where many older persons are not able to earn a living or lost their main source of income. So yeah, that is very like one of the challenges faced by the older person now in the country. Then third, we have this Older Citizens Monitoring Committee and Help Desk. So far, we piloted this accountability mechanism for already 22 municipalities established in different areas. So it is a community-based monitoring mechanism composed of trained older persons who monitor the implementation of policies and services for them. So older persons are monitoring their own programs and policies. So the help desk, which is also manned by the trained older person, is a mechanism wherein individuals, especially older person, can report or can lodge their complaints. So issues on, for example, there are like complaints on the implementation of social pension, elder abuse, violation of older persons' rights, and others. And these are being recorded, processed, and referred to the appropriate agency by the help desk officer. So older persons manning both the OCMC and the help desk are well trained on the different laws and policies of senior citizens. They should be aware of various government's available programs and services, know how to properly communicate with clients or with older persons, and they should know where to refer the clients, for example. So there is a series of trainings being attended by them. And next, it is introduced to us by Mr. Cho, researcher of HelpAge Korea, the home care and the home care assistance program. So even before the pandemic, there are trained older persons have been doing community works as home care volunteers, doing home visitation, offering services to fellow older persons, from assisting and feeding, bathing, and other daily activities. So with the mobility restriction now that we are experiencing due to the pandemic and lack of means, many older persons have limited or no access at all to some basic services. So there is where the trained home care volunteers, who are older persons, come in and assist the older person. So they are also provided with many trainings to enhance continuous development, to enhance their skills and knowledge in providing home care services to their older person. And I think the last, I exceeded, I think, for 5 minutes, is the participation of older persons in the provision of immunopacks. So when the COVID-19 pandemic began, COPAP, our partner confederation, and COSE, in partnership with the Philippine Senator and other donors, we provided immunopacks to thousands, more than 20,000 older persons in different areas in Metro Manila and nearby provinces. So the older persons leaders, again, played a crucial role in this initiative. They've coordinated with the barangay officials, identified who among the older persons in the organization or community should receive the assistance, they also gather donation from older persons organization, those who are capable to donate, and they help in repacking of goods and in the distribution of goods. So yeah, I think that's all for now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, we just listened to 6 different speakers, and we could see the similarities of all our experiences in trying to meet the challenges of COVID-19, which really impacted the lives of all the people around the globe. And I was really impressed that all the NGOs at the national and international and regional level have been working so hard to overcome this crisis with very creative and I think courageous efforts. And they all deserve our kudos, I think. Now I'd like to open the floor for discussion. Maybe Ms. Yeong could, maybe you have questions or comments to what was presented by other speakers, and you can just feel free to ask questions to each other and make comments. And so we'll spend about 20-30 minutes having free discussion, and then try to wrap up with where we will go from here. So maybe I can invite Ms. Yeong again.
Thank you, Professor Park. It was very impressive to hear all the different efforts underway and to learn so much more about the different angles at which we can advocate. I'm really curious as to what Emily just shared about older people coming together with their voices, and so many older people coming together with their voices for their own well-being and for their rights. Maybe if you can take a couple of moments to just share, like how did that come about? Like what were some of the key things that got that big group together? I think that would be really awesome to learn.
Yeah, actually, because we are like forming or we do formation and the strengthening of older persons organizations. So we have this group of older persons that is being federated, and now we have the confederation since 2006. We have this confederation. So because they are really organized and they are provided with different capacity development in organizational and program development, and they are aware of their issues and concern. They know what to ask from the government. So I think that's what helped why we can easily gather them. And even now, during the pandemic, we have online discussions, consultations with them. So we maintain that.
Okay, so does anyone like to ask questions to other panelists? Even though I'm a moderator, since I'm working in Korea, maybe I can share a little bit of what's going on in Korea. And I just wanted to mention that even though we have Mr. Jo with us today, who is representing HelpAge Korea and one of the very important organization representing older people's human rights. In Korea, I think the human rights of older persons or people, the concept itself is relatively not new, but relatively not much used in, and people who are working for the rights of human rights in Korea, even though we are all working, whether you are in education or social services or in medical services, they don't identify themselves as human rights advocates or human rights practitioners. So what at this point we're trying to do is really help people to come together and have them work together, and to how to build partnership between the public sector and the private sector. NGOs is very important, but in Korea we are still at a stage where we still need to create a balancing model of the partnership between the public and the private. And we are really trying to help older people to have their own voices. So recently we have some very creative programs in local community centers where they have a program called Senior Citizens. In Korean, literally, it's a sort of older people who are like the seniors and the juniors in college. So we are trying to train older people to have the identity where they can make contributions to community and for next generation of younger people, and make contributions to social values and things like that. So I think it's a new process in Korea where we are trying to instill in older people's mind that they can have their own voices and they can be their own advocates. So that's sort of the experience in Korea. And the word ageism is really difficult to translate in Korean. So that's, I'm glad that we have this big document published by WHO, and it has very, I think, good information that we could use to communicate what ageism is across different sectors. But the term is very new in Korea. And so that, even though we have come a long way, I feel like we still have a long way to go. So it'd be, I think, nice to talk about what are some of more innovative ways that you are trying to bring together to your own organizations in terms of doing this advocacy work in the national level and also in the international level as well.
May I come in here?
Yes, sure.
Thank you, because what you said is very important, the issue of language, and I think language is really important because it really shapes the way we think. And I know that ageism doesn't exist in several other languages, but that's why we need to explain what we mean, and I'm sure that you will find a word that best reflects the issue. And this brings me again to the importance of this report that is mandated now by the resolution of the Human Rights Council, that is not only a report that will be presented by the High Commissioner, but it also requested that also will be in the 6 official languages of the UN, and also a request to make the report in plain language and easy to read. That means that we are trying to put all the documentation that it's issued by human rights mechanisms in language that is accessible to all, that we can understand the concepts and we can easily advocate using the language that is easily understood by all, and try to get away from jargon, try to get away from words that imply assumptions or about older persons towards a more universal way of looking at older persons with all their variety, heterogeneity, and diversity that exists in old age. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I noticed there's no virtual hands to put up, so I was putting up my physical hand. And I think I just wanted to reflect on Silvia's point about language and a couple of points here around language. I think in terms of ageism not existing in many different languages, that was something that we found at HelpAge when we were talking to our colleagues that were working in different countries. And this was about four years ago now. So I think things are starting to change, and whether they're using another word in their local context or whether they're using the English word. But I think, you know, it's important that it is something that is increasingly being recognised. I think it's really important that we continue to ask older people about their own lived experiences of ageism as well. And HelpAge, we consulted with older people about what ageing and ageism means to them, and they shared with us that it means being excluded. Like it means you don't exist. It means that you're invisible. And so these were some of the things that they were sharing with us. So I think in terms of the current definition, I think it's a good one, but I think we should continue to explore what ageism means to older people and how it intersects with other issues. And I think Marijan Luzin, you said a very interesting thing, and apologies, my pronunciation of Belgian names is terrible. But you spoke about language during the pandemic and that older people were described as vulnerable. And I think it's something that those of us who work in older people's human rights, you know, pick up on that language of older people being vulnerable. But I just wanted to ask other panelists, you know, sort of what they think about using this language and why it's problematic. Because I think that's really, again, coming back to language, it's important. So any other views on why vulnerables are problematic and why we should potentially steer away from using it?
The reason why we find it problematic is that if they identify it as group, as the whole group is vulnerable, we said that one whole person is not another. It was very diverse, and that's important to say. Maybe there are some kinds that are more vulnerable. That's not a problem, but you can't say that whole group is vulnerable, and that's a problematic.
I would like to add, if I may, I also said in the previous session in which I spoke, nobody is inherently vulnerable. We are put in vulnerable situations. We are put in situations of risk. We are made vulnerable because of the limitations of the environment, because of the discrimination that we suffer. We didn't die, people didn't die simply because the virus killed us. Older people died because they were locked in congregated environments where they were more infected than they would have done if they were living in the community with adequate services. We are not vulnerable. We are made vulnerable, and I think that we really need to use language that reflects that and that we are put at risk. So we are in situations of risk. And totally in line with Jemma. I just wanted to comment that about the language of the definition of ageism, that the second report on ageism that was launched by the independent expert also at the last session, on which the resolution actually based the language and even the definition, which is based on human rights. So it focuses ageism within really a human rights lens. And I totally agree with Jemma as well that we need to carry on and exploring the perceptions. And regarding the language, even the translations are different. WHO decided to translate ageism into Spanish with the word edadismo, which is used in Spain. But many organizations in Latin America use the word viejismo, which would translate directly like olderism, which immediately when you hear it, you know that you are talking about ageism against older persons. So we are far from having one definition or one word that will fit all. And I think that we need to carry on exploring. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
In Belgium, they put a number on if you are 65 during the pandemic, then you have more risk, and if you are 64, there isn't a problem. So that's why we have drafted a national charter for participation during the pandemic, so that elderly people or people can make their own choice, an informed choice, so they know what are the consequences or not, but so they have their own choice to participate or not. Because it's very arbitrary to say that if you are 65, you are vulnerable, and if you are 63, you aren't. So that was problematic, and that we comment.
Okay, Ms. Young, you had some comment that you wanted to share with us?
Yes, I was just going to pick up on the labeling of vulnerability and whether or not it's right to use that in what context. I think there's two sides of the coin. Like in today's world, it's much more complex. We look toward like some individuals who are able or who needs to continue to work, continue to thrive, positively age. So the vulnerability label certainly doesn't apply when it comes to that type of ageism. But there are, older persons who are vulnerable, who are at risk because of perhaps where the countries are in war zones, or perhaps over a lifetime of social economic circumstances, they are vulnerable. So I think it's not one or the other, like black and white, don't use the word, but I think it's very much to what was just discussed about the picture of the older person and aging that's so different and individual. So I don't have an answer, but all I'm just saying is that not vulnerable, but don't throw it out either, because it applies in certain cases, in my view. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I think since we decide to go without a break time, maybe we can finish in about 20 minutes. Try to finish in 20 minutes. And I'll give the floor to each one of you to give comments to wrap up, focusing on, I think we can talk about how we can succeed in ratifying this Convention on the Human Rights of Older People. And I know, well, I don't know very well, but I know that it's kind of complicated process where different parties have different views. But I think at the same time that since with this enormous issue of global aging, I'm sure UN is very much concerned about this issue, and maybe we are moving forward towards more positive results. So I hope that maybe you can give us some comments as to what we can do together from where we are. So maybe bring some ideas together to come up with a conclusion for today's dialogue. So who would like to start first? Or should we go through the order that we did? Well, maybe we can start from the last person who spoke. I'll give Ms. Emily Beredico your turn first, and then move backwards from now.
Yes. So for us, for the first for the UN Convention on Rights of Persons, we really support the adoption. So in partnership with the Commission on Human Rights, we signed petition letters, statements, and shared to other government agencies to support the adoption. So that is one. And on the campaign on ASEM, in partnership with the HelpAge International, we do a campaign to end ageism. And fortunately, it is, I agree that when you say ageism, it's really difficult to understand. So we always if we say ageism, discrimination based on age, so we understand that. So, and now, we are doing this campaign, and even when we revise our vision mission goal, we included that one as part of our campaign. And part of the activity, older persons also are, because we started raising awareness with the older persons themselves, and now they are helping us in in the awareness raising. So they serve as the resource person also when government agencies and other stakeholders are inviting us. And I think one of the conclusion that, because I think it is a problem everywhere, the lack of database for older persons. So I think that is one that we can work together to have a concrete, disaggregated gender, age, disability data, so that it could be a basis for our policy advocacy. Because in the Philippines, in our experience, we always ask data whenever we talk to the legislators for the establishment of policies and programs for older persons. So, and also for the social protection program, I think, so on the universal social pension, so I think, that is the common denominator of all the countries, especially the poor countries. I think that's all. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Margin Luzen, would you like to add some comments?
In the beginning, Ocker was a cool lover of a separate convention, because we think, in our opinion, that the policy of elderly is an inclusive policy. But it's very important, our position has changed through our international cooperation, through our intensive contacts with groups in Bangladesh, GK. They convinced us that it's important to have a separate convention, so that we can better defend the rights of elderly people. We change our vision and attitude, but also our commitment to convince the federal government here in Belgium of the usefulness of a separate UN convention. And there was a member of the parliament who was created in a resolution in collaboration with OPTA. So to create a separate. It's helpful, I think, to make concrete changes for elderly people, and also it can empower older people to defend their rights. Creates a little bit more space, I think, for elderly people and for organizations to defend their rights. And maybe now the efforts are dispersed and inconsistent, and maybe a specific convention can help us better.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to invite my colleague, Mr. Hyunse, for his comments.
During this pandemic situation, we recognize that older people are unintentionally excluded from the society. However, in Korea, there's no voice from the older people to protect their rights. There is no platform to represent all the people's rights. And in addition, there are few civil society organizations to advocate for older people. So HelpAge Korea also has limitations to advocate for older people in this situation. So we may need to be more sensitive to the human rights issue of older people in the future, and also we need to build up our capacity to respond to them. And regarding the convention, Korea has lots of limitations. The first is that there is no government department in charge of the convention. So only the diplomat in New York participates into the OEWG meeting, and there is no discussion process between the Korean government in Korea and the diplomat in the New York. And the other thing is that there is few civil society organizations have interest in this convention. As far as I know, at the last OEWG meeting, HelpAge Korea is the only NGO participates in the OEWG meeting. But fortunately, the National Commission of Human Rights Institution in Korea and also AGAC and HelpAge Korea are supporting the convention. Now it's a small number, but we are expecting to gather more organizations and experts to support the convention in the future. I hope this kind of forum and seminar will be an opportunity to pay more attention on this issue to the civil society organizations and experts in Korea and other countries.
Okay, well, thank you very much. The Global Age Watch Index, which was published by HelpAge International, is very important tool in Korea to sort of persuade government to work harder. But unfortunately, it stopped publishing in, I think the last index was in 2015, and I hope that we can do something together to come up with another data like that. So I don't know if you are involved in this process, but I'd like to have some comments from Ms. Stovell. Yes.
I'm not involved in the Global Age Watch Index, unfortunately. I was around at HelpAge when that took place. It was obviously a big project. But I'm interested to share that with colleagues that yeah, it's been a useful tool, and I think it's been a useful tool for others in different countries engaging governments and other people's rights as well. So thank you for that. I will pass on that information. In terms of my closing remarks, I think as civil society, we can really continue to encourage our governments to attend the open-ended working group, to engage in the next session, to participate in negotiations when hopefully it gets to that point. And I'm sure Silvia will have some other remarks around this. I think we have a role to play to continue pushing this agenda, because without that pressure at the national level, then governments may not be interested. And we have seen, what's been going on with the pandemic in terms of older people's human rights, but I don't think we can let people forget, what the situation has been like. And I think we need to continue, many of us who work with older people, we are the ones that are working directly with older people. So making sure that, older people's voices are heard at different levels is incredibly important. And then I think it was an excellent opportunity to hear from others about different initiatives. So continuing to connect with others. Obviously, the Age with Rights campaign that Gareth is running, I think, is incredibly important. Age Platform Europe also do a lot of campaigning, so I think wherever we are, there are opportunities to engage. and the WHO Global Report to combat ageism as a tool, but also thinking about the global campaign and how we can engage. So I think that's all from me, but it's been a very encouraging discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now to Ms. Silvia Perel-Levin.
Thank you. I strongly believe that we need a convention on the rights of older persons. I think that after 12 years of an open-ended working group, and really, I think that we cannot wait anymore. We need to start drafting a text that will ultimately assist member states in protecting the rights of older persons. It's a tool that will help them in defining and in enabling our participation more and more. As rightly some say, there are dispersed efforts, and there are older persons that don't even know they have a voice. So we need, it is the role of the governments to ensure that we do have that voice. So if we don't have it, please give it to us. And then we will go out, because the convention is not just for the older persons of today, it's really for the old persons of the next generations as well, so that the young people of today can hope to grow older in a better condition than the older people of today live. And really, we need to smash the misunderstandings. We are not creating or segregating older persons from the other rights holders. On the contrary, what we are calling is for enabling us to claim our rights in equal basis with others. We are equal. We have to age equal. We have to be in older age with the same rights as we have had throughout our life, and improve all the time. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We will carry on, and this link between New York, Geneva, and the governments in the countries is crucial. And we need to make sure that the governments in capitals are involved in the discussions in New York and in Geneva, and in discussions with us, in consultation with us, before or during those engagements in the international arena. Thank you.
Thank you for your very strong statement. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Margaret Yeong.
Thank you. I think I've said a lot already during my presentation, but hearing others, what I reflect on is ever more the importance of national advocacy. As it was shared, like in some spots of our world, it comes together easier and others not. And I think it comes down to the fact that the rights holder group that we're talking about, in this case, the older person, is not as vocal. And us, how do we support that in creating that voice? I think one of the key things is always to consider that age intersects all. So as we're advocating in other arenas, always bring rights of older people to the forefront. In the work that I do, be it a research project or a grant that we're applying for, the human rights equality issue always comes in, because that's all the work that I do in terms of older people. So I think, as others said, this has been a really wonderful opportunity to share and to chat and to learn from one another, and to hear the positive hope that can be, that we will get that convention. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. For personally, it has been really a very rewarding and empowering experience for me to meet all of you and discuss this topic today, because sometimes I think we need like a support group for our own work, and I'm really grateful that ASEM Global Aging Center has created this platform where it's a very young organization, as many of you already know, but I think it will play a very important role in the future to bridge the gap between not to bridge the gap, but also bring together both public and the private sector together, and bring different countries together in Asia, Europe, and in other continents. So I'm really grateful that we had this very first civil society talk concert today, but hopefully this will continue and also bring more people together to share these ideas and ways to improve the human rights of all the people. And I really like to thank all our distinguished experts today who have joined our program today, and thank you very much.